Hello and welcome back to another episode of our draft series. We're now finally, I can say, truly coming down the home stretch. Last day of recording these episodes. We've got two more guys. So the first guy we're going to talk about is Kyle McCord. So Jon, thanks for joining today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Glad to be wrapping it up.
It's ironic, I think, that the two guys we're talking about are the guy that Ohio State ran out of town, which is Kyle McCord, and then the guy they brought in Will Howard. Obviously, this episode's going to be focused on McCord. But it was very funny to watch these guys back to back because they are different players, but I ended up feeling like pretty similarly about both of them. So all that work for pretty similar prospects, but definitely worked out for Ohio State. But we'll focus on McCord here first. He is an interesting player. I think this is a guy that he's not necessarily going to wow you a lot when you're watching him on tape in terms of the athleticism, but overall, I think had a great year for Syracuse. And from where he was at this point last year, coming off a very down year at Ohio State with a lot of disappointment, he's got to be feeling really good about the performance he had last year.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think that's one of the encouraging things about McCord. I think you saw a lot of growth with him this year, I think he was just overall a whole lot better for Syracuse. Maybe less pressure on him. I know there had to be less pressure on him than there is at Ohio State, but I thought that he looked a lot better too.
Yeah, I definitely think there were areas he improved in. I think there's probably also some of this that was just mental at Ohio State. Like he is a guy that relies on a lot of the processing stuff. So for him, I think if he was kind of mentally getting overwhelmed by the expectations and the struggles he was going through at Ohio State, it doesn't surprise me that he was able to overcome some of that in a smaller, less high stakes environment. But they had a pretty good year. I mean, they ended up beating Miami at the end of the year. I think Fran Brown has that program and going in a good direction. I was very impressed with their pass catchers in general. I think I already had mentioned to you offline, I thought their tight end was very impressive, and they have some wide receiver talent. One of those guys I think is actually in the portal right now and is the number one wide receiver in the portal currently. So they had a very good year at Syracuse, but McCord was the main engine of that. And you see it in the way that they ran their offense. They ran a ton of 5-out stuff that was just putting the onus on him to read out the defense and make a play. I thought they did a good job of making things pretty easy for him in terms of a lot of quick game, a lot of quick, simple reads that he was able to target. But you could tell they really trusted him in that offense because there are a ton of plays that he is the main decision maker on. It's not just force fed to him in terms of here's the one guy you're gonna read out. So that was something that impressed me with the way that Syracuse trusted him.
Yeah, and you don't see that too often from some of these college quarterbacks where we've talked a lot about the systems that they're playing in where there's only one read. There's really not even a read. It's predetermined who it's going to before the play, or you incorporate a lot of screens where you know where you're going when you're designing a screen. But I do think McCord ran a lot more stuff that he was actually asked to read the defense and decide where to go with the ball, which is more encouraging than some of the other guys in this class.
All right, let's get into the throwing, which I think is definitely the most important part of
Yeah.
his game to discuss. Overall, I was pretty impressed with him as a thrower. I thought he threw with very good touch and had the ability to have different types of throws in his bag. I thought he was pretty good in ball placement, and you see a lot of different kinds of throws on his tape. The biggest thing that I'll call out with him that I thought was very impressive and I think will help him a lot at the NFL level is I think he is maybe the best guy I've seen this year at maintaining his accuracy when he's throwing with velocity. There you see a ton of throws that he is letting it rip and throwing very confidently, and the ball is on target very consistently. I think for a guy like him that does not have elite arm strength, that is a big weapon for him because it allows him to still let it rip on a lot of throws where he's going to need to deliver the ball into a tight window. And I think he got a lot of experience with that at Syracuse.
Yeah, and he really doesn't have like an elite arm, but I think that the way that he throws when he does rev it up, he still has a good arm. And to your point, when he does that, he is usually able to maintain accuracy. I thought that especially when they were throwing over the middle, they would get in sequences. They would run a lot of screens or a lot of seam routes, and on those like short and intermediate middle of the field routes, I thought that he was able to fire it in pretty consistently. That was some of his favorite stuff, or some of my favorite stuff that he was able to do consistently last year at Syracuse. You mentioned the touch. I thought that when he was at Ohio State, I thought that was one of the areas he grew the most.
Yeah.
When at Ohio State, he was trying to rifle it every single play. And I think he learned a little better ball speed management and was able to vary the speeds more when he was at Syracuse.
Yeah, I think he got a lot more comfortable in the timing of their offense. Like you still saw him throw at that velocity, but it was he managed it well enough where you didn't see a lot of receivers looking overwhelmed or not expecting a throw coming their way and then him getting that throw on them before they're ready. I think I agree with you. Like he has a good arm. Like almost every other guy in this class, you don't see a lot of throws where it's 30 40 down 30 40 yards down the field on a line. Like he relies more on lobbing the deep ball. I feel like I've said that for almost every guy in this class though. So it's not really a huge indictment. It's just not like you're not seeing those plus throws from his film. He kind of has a little bit of a weird throwing motion. Like when you first watch him, it's kind of it's a little jarring at first, but I actually thought like he was pretty consistent with it, and I am not super concerned about that at the next level.
I'm not either because it's pretty short. It's a little weird looking, but it comes out quick. And to your point, I thought he was consistent with it. He was probably one of the more consistent mechanic quarterbacks this season, and I think that makes sense with his style. He is not a guy that's going to win by moving around and making some like changing arm angles, and he's going to be in the pocket, operate efficiently, get the ball out quick, and he relies on his mechanics to be consistent to do that.
Yeah, the release part is weird because when you first watch it, it looks long, but you see how quickly he gets the ball out. And it's like, okay, well, I guess it's not really a problem. So yeah, I agree. Like it's not a big concern for me. Other than that, I think the arm strength. You do see throws that are really tough. He's not able to make because of it, but I don't think it limits him drastically. And he also does get to step into a lot of throws because of how quick their offense was. I kind of wish I had got to see him have to rely on like throwing off platform a little bit more just to see like, is that something he can do more consistently? But overall, I think he's an impressive thrower.
I thought so. I will say I maybe don't view him quite as highly as you, and this is where I'll deviate a little bit. I see a lot of the upside, and I see a lot of good plays. I do think that he flashes the placement where he'll fit it in a really tight window. I think that there were times where you mentioned Syracuse does have some receiver talent, but I thought that coming off watching Ohio State, there is that drop off, and on plays where they're not open, he's still able to make some of those throws into tight windows. But I thought that was not something he did super consistently. He flashed it at times, and then other times that placement would kind of go away. Overall, I found him accurate, but there were times where the placement was not always consistent.
Yeah, that probably is so far the biggest place that we differ on him. But I do think there were times where, like you definitely see times where like when he sees something, he commits to it, and I like that about his game. Like there are a lot of other guys we've watched so far that do not do that. Like they will sit there and like think about pulling the trigger. But I do think, like you said, that will sometimes lead to, he tries to attack a window that's too tight, or he ends up placing a ball that is not a perfect throw because he he doesn't exactly anticipate it perfectly. Those types of scenarios. So I do see that as well on his tape.
And I think that I think he led PFF's big time throws and turnover worthy, either turnover worthy plays or specifically turnover worthy throws. I think he led in both categories, which makes sense with his game because he does make some really impressive throws, but then sometimes he's going for it too much. He's a little bit of that gunslinger
Yeah.
mentality.
And I think it's hard for people to look at him that way because he's like people just remember him as like the boring Ohio State quarterback who wasn't very good. But yeah, as you start to watch the tape more and more, you do get a feel for like, oh, this is kind of a different player than I was expecting to be watching.
Yeah.
I was expecting the quick game stuff like that. That did not surprise me. The gunslinger piece though was a little bit more. And yeah, he had. We can get into this now. He had a game against Pitt where he threw 5 interceptions. If you go back and watch the game, like I watched that wasn't one of the games I like deep dove on for film, but I was like, I got to go back and watch these picks just to see what happened. A couple of them weren't really his fault. Like it was probably more truly like a 3 interception game, but there are plays like that where it's just over aggressive or he just tries to force something that's not there, or like you said, the ball placement's not perfect. That does show up on his tape. I think, like you said, it's not that at least with him, I think you can say that you get the good with the bad. Like,
Yeah.
The PFF stats perfect. Like most big time throws, most turnover worthy throws. At least you've got both of those instead of just being the turnover
just the
guy.
negative.
But I agree. Like when I watched him, I thought even before I watched that Pitt game, just watching the amount of tight windows he throws into, I thought like if this guy started his rookie year, he would throw so many interceptions because he was just forced. And I was like, the last guy I thought that about, who I was like super wrong about, was Stroud. Like I thought he was going to throw picks his rookie year. He ended up like barely throwing any because he was just so good that it didn't matter. McCord is a guy that I think fits in that bucket of like be prepared for some interceptions if he sees the field early.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, and it just comes from his mentality, the way that he plays the game. But I think that is necessary for him. He's not going to be a guy that uh, he has to chase that for any kind of upside because that is where he wins. He's going to win uh, by pushing the ball and making good throws into tight windows. So if he can be more consistent with that and maybe learn when not to take those risks, I think he could be a good quarterback.
Yeah, I agree. The other thing with his throwing I was impressed with is I thought he was very good against the blitz, which is part of that is because I think he was so comfortable in the spread offense that they ran, and he was already so used to getting the ball out quickly that it wasn't much of a change from the way that they played. But I thought he was really comfortable in that and still delivered throws like on time with good velocity in those scenarios. It's going to be different in the NFL when you're seeing pressure and those kind of looks and you're not 5 wide and so spread out that you can immediately ID like, okay, here's my guy that's going to be in man-to-man that I trust to win. But I do think he did a good job of that at the college level.
Yeah, I thought so, and I think a lot of it is because he's getting the ball out quickly, which is something that I plenty of, especially the new age of quarterbacks where guys want to hold on to it, make a play. Some of them need to learn a little bit of that. Is like get the ball out quicker. Doesn't matter if it's only 3 or 4 yards. It's better than taking a sack. It's better than forcing an interception. And you go back and watch Peyton Manning. He got the ball out really quick. Tom Brady got the ball out quick. And I think that overall can be a really important piece, especially for these quarterbacks. We mentioned the Brady Manning. I'm not making that comparison. Obviously we'll get to comps later, but if you're going to win from the pocket with very little mobility, which I really don't think McCord has mobility,
We can get to that
maybe
next.
get to that next, you have to get the ball out quick. So at least he is able to do that.
Yeah, I agree. Let's get to the mobility. That I don't think there's really much to say here. It's not the worst in the draft, but it's not a factor really. It's I think especially like he does not escape the pocket well. Like he's a very stiff mover. So he just really struggles to like find that burst of acceleration or find that rushing lane. that he can escape with. I don't think he is like just an absolute statue in the pocket, and I also don't think he is like a completely, like just slow-footed guy when he's like getting like got momentum going. But I definitely wish he was a more had some more escapability, because I think if you pair that with like his gunslinger ability, all of a sudden you start to see a picture for a guy that could like you said, make a ton of big time throws. I think that limits the upside of that a little bit for him in the NFL.
Yeah, and okay, maybe I'll preface this by saying I've heard this as a comp for him, and one of the reasons I don't like it, I heard Brock Purdy as a comp for him because of the gunslinger mentality, but I think Purdy has that mobility, that escapability. He's not like run all over you, but he has that escapability to make some of those plays, and I think that's what is missing from McCord's game to play like that.
Yeah.
I thought I was going to add something there, but I don't have anything to add to that.
No, you're good. I don't have a ton more to add on him either. We can jump into the clips unless you have anything else you wanted to throw out with the eval.
No, I think that's it.
All right, let's do it. All right. All right. So I've just got 3 clips from McCord. I think part of that is because, am I really just going to put a bunch of like hitch routes on the screen over and over? Like he's good at that stuff, but like we don't have to waste our time. This first play is just an example of a play where I wish he had just a little bit better arm strength, because I do think, like you said, like you see the gunslinger mentality at times with him. They're rolling out here. I think he wants originally this hitch, but you see what is probably just a clear out route ends up being like very open if he's able to set his feet here as he's rolling out and fire this to like basically the goal line in the middle of the field. But as he rolls out, you see like he just does not make the throw. And I don't know if this, it's hard to get inside a player's mind and know exactly what they're thinking here, whether, he just didn't see it the same way. I think he just didn't think he could make the throw, and that's why he didn't try it. Like right here, to me, like his head is looking downfield to me, and this is not really like a huge knock on him. It's just to kind of reinforce the idea that we're not talking about like a Cam Ward type of arm here, where I think Cam Ward sets his feet and throws this right at the bottom of the T, or at, maybe the outside part of the S here, and it's a touchdown.
Yeah.
With McCord, this ends up being a throwaway. We'll look at another play here in a minute that you do see like the ball placement, the touch and stuff from McCord, but I think this just serves to reinforce like this probably isn't a guy with a ton of upside.
Yeah, and I think overall it's like he has. I think he has some good traits, but he lacks the elite arm that he would really need with his play style to really be a great quarterback in the NFL. And that does limit his upside a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, to me, he is like one good skill away from being a very real prospect. Like if you improve the mobility, if you improve the arm strength, like either of those, I think this is a very intriguing guy.
I agree. I totally agree.
All right, so this play here is a demonstration of, I think, an example where he kind of corrects a little bit of what we saw on the last clip in the same game, which is cool. But also here you see the touch and the level of arm strength that he does have. So he makes a guy miss here. This receiver, I can't remember his name. He's number 2. This is the guy that is their best player or best receiver that's in the portal.
He was really good.
Yeah, he's a very good player. I was very impressed watching him. McCord rolls out here, and you can see at this time, we get this guy to sink down. I don't really know why he decides to sink down at this point, but he does. And McCord identifies this immediately. Sets his feet, rips a throw, gets it down before the DB can come back from the sideline and get off his man to make this more of a problem and get his guy blown up. We'll see the end zone view here as well. These are the plays that, like you said, the gunslinger mentality, he has that, and I think he executes on it and throws with good enough touch to make it work. Like this is a very tough throw, and that's a crowded window.
Yeah.
And he does a really good job of fitting that ball in.
Yeah, this was a memorable one. I as soon as they lined up, I remembered this play. Um, that is one of the big time throws, the tight
Yeah.
windows that he's able to fit it into. Um, and when he's doing that, he can be really successful.
Yep. All right, last clip here. He's about to just launch a go ball here. They've got one on one on the outside. Not much to add here, but you just again you see the arm talent here and the touch that he has. Even against pressure, he gets this ball out, kind of spinning away, gives this guy a chance. You could maybe argue this is like a tiny bit underthrown, but given the pressure that was getting home there, and the fact that it's in the end zone, like I still think this is a very good throw, and gives this guy a chance to go make a play.
Yeah, this is not so underthrown that it is just an easy turnaround interception. And when you got that one on one with, you trust your guy, your guy is really good on the outside. This is as good a chance as he's going to get to win a one on one. And he does. He converts it here. So,
Yep. So those are the clips. Overall, I think he was a fun watch. Like anytime this is kind of the mid round guy I enjoy watching the most. Like at least he's gonna try some stuff and let you watch him make some great throws, also make some mistakes. But I definitely this is definitely the guy that I enjoy watching more. In terms of comps here, I'm curious to see where you're at. I feel okay about my two comps, but I'll let you start.
yeah, I struggled with this one a little bit because I think that there is some upside for a solid quarterback somewhere in there. I think it's probably like bottom half, like the 24th to 32nd starter in the NFL. Like I think that was like realistically his upside. Um, I don't think this one's perfect. I can kind of see a little bit of like a Jay Cutler with no rung, just in like the way that they approach the game, the way that
Yeah,
they
that's a
see
good
it.
one.
But Cutler had a better arm, so that's not like a perfect comp. But that's kind of where I went with it.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think especially like the play style,
Yeah,
kind of you get there with you get the interceptions, but you also get a lot of the
hunting
huge
the big
throws.
plays. Yeah,
Definitely like you said, Cutler, a more talented player coming out of college for sure, just in terms of the arm that he
yeah,
had. But I agree.
and could
That's
run as well. So like
yeah,
two things that McCord really he doesn't have quite that level of upside, but
yeah. My best case, and I do think I see a little more upside in McCord. My best case for him was Baker Mayfield. I
okay,
I think maybe I'm number scouting the fact that he wears number 6, but
six.
their builds and like the way they throw reminded me a lot of each other. A guy that Mayfield definitely has more mobility, which I think is like allows him to be a little bit more creative player at the NFL level. But Mayfield is another guy that can rip throws. Like he has one of the highest velocities of any quarterback in the NFL. And so that specifically also reminded me of McCord because I was thinking a lot about the velocity he throws with and still maintaining the accuracy. So that specifically is kind of what led me to the Mayfield comp. But in terms of physical traits, I don't think they're all that far off. I think Mayfield's probably a little bit better down the field. He has a better arm. He's a little bit better of an athlete. But I think if McCord succeeds, the way that he plays probably doesn't look super different from the way Mayfield succeeds. And I think McCord's ceiling, like to me, is probably somewhere around like if everything goes right, he's probably the 15th to 20th best quarterback in the NFL, something like that.
Yeah.
Mayfield's kind of stepped up above that a little bit the past couple of years, I think, to most people, but we're not too far away there.
Yeah, I think that just in like the way that he would win in the NFL, I think that comparison makes a lot of sense with Baker.
All right. I can do my worst case. I actually kind of like this one. My worst case is Jarrett Stidham. Just another guy that like you I feel like got a lot of opportunities in the NFL because it's like, well, have you seen this guy throw? Like, he throws the ball pretty well. And then Stidham definitely had more mobility, and I think Stidham was probably a less clean player than McCord is. But like to me, I think their builds are similar, and Stidham just never really cleaned up the things that he would have had to become like a legit NFL guy. And will kind of bounce around the league. I think McCord, if he doesn't work out, I think it probably looks similar to how Stidham's career has gone.
Yeah, I kind of went similar, but a different player. So I went with CJ third. So he was like a Big Ten quarterback. Didn't really move. Had a pretty good arm. He was a developmental guy who didn't pan out, and I think it's a lot of the same things. Like, had some possibilities there with his arm, but like just never really cleaned it up, never really like honed in on what he could do well. So I could see McCord being that. Well, I think Stidham is like a similar type of player. It bounced around a little bit. Both had some chances.
Yeah. CJ Beathard from Franklin, Tennessee. So
I did not know he was from Franklin. Yeah. So, nice.
But yeah, that I think that makes sense. It's, to me, I do think his downside still involves him being a backup. But I do think that like he might end up being the backup that like you're a little scared when he gets put in the game. Like, what, this may work out really well. This may also result in like 3 interceptions. Which I would still rather watch that than some of the other, like the Chase Daniel, like I'm just gonna never take a single risk type of thing. But yeah, that is definitely a possibility with McCord. Okay, John, what is your final grade on McCord?
For him and Howard, I had a hard time like settling on a range where I'd want to take them. At times I was thinking a little higher from McCord, and then I thought a little lower during some of his bad games. But I kind of settled in like the 5th round. I think that he's worthy of a day 3 pick, and taking him later than this, I think, is kind of a disservice. Like I think he presents an upside to be a starting level quarterback in the NFL, and that's definitely worth taking before like the 6th or 7th round. And I think that I would understand if somebody wanted to take him a little bit higher than that, but
yeah, and that somebody is me. I have a 3rd round, like an early 3rd on McCord. He's definitely a guy that I think I am higher on than consensus in this cycle. Probably not a surprise. This is the type of guy I always gravitate towards, but I just think he makes a lot of NFL throws, and if the interceptions could just get toned down a little bit, I see a path to becoming a starter for him. I do think his arm is good enough for that. The athleticism piece, I think you kind of know what that is. But yeah, I was very impressed with him and came away more positive than I expected.
Yeah, and I think that's understandable, just based on like big time throws. And I think that's why you can see some people do really like him in this group of quarterbacks. Yeah.
It definitely is like a ceiling versus floor thing as well. I don't think his floor is super low, but you can definitely, in a similar way to like a Milroe, but it's like it's very different in terms of what they do. But you're kind of looking at those like top end plays. It's like, okay, if we can translate that more, that's what you're hoping for.
Yeah.
All right, I think that'll do it for the McCord episode. So a guy that we do have a little bit of separation on. I think you're going to try to do a recap episode after all of these that kind of like highlights some of the biggest differences we had and final thoughts on the class. Yeah. So stay tuned for that. I guess McCord will probably be one of those guys now. But yeah, thanks everybody for watching, and we'll catch you next time.